Today is Saturday, December 9th. Michael Cook speaking. It's currently about 11 o'clock. I'm making this video because I'm going to piece it together with the audio recording I recorded earlier this morning. And, here's a look at Cokies Canyon. I'm in the rear of Half Moon Heights. I'm going to be walking through the woods. So I'm going to be rather quiet from here on out and let the audio recording play out. Audio log, Saturday, December 9th, 2023. Michael Cook speaking. It's currently 12:27 a.m. I'm making this audio recording to talk about some concepts that I'm going to talk about in a video that I plan to record tomorrow. I'm going to go over some of those concepts while walking around. The concepts that I want to talk about are infrastructure and various other things, but I wanted to here, let me get situated before I start reading stuff off. Infrastructure. So Infrastructure is a company that I worked with in 2010 into the beginning of 2011, located at 5 Enterprise Lane in either Clifton Park or Half Moon, New York, 12065. My experience there was rather short-lived, but pretty cool company. Not exactly thrilled with the way that I was fired from the company. Started working there after I got my Microsoft certifications, and the reason why I'm bringing it up because the number of correlating topics that I'm going to talk about, and it has a lot to do with FightingEntropy, the module that I've been building over the last, it's had various code names or portions of work and stuff, but FightingEntropy is a module that I've been developing for Windows PowerShell, or PowerShell in general, for Windows 10/11 and probably 12. In addition to Windows Server 2016, 2019, 2022. Haven't fully fleshed out everything for each of those. I've been focusing mostly on Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016, though I plan on expanding at some point. The point of FightingEntropy, in a nutshell, in the shortest possible term, is remediation and control through virtualization and network/hardware administration. So, recently I've talked about new FV infrastructure, which has a lot to do with setting up a whole bunch of virtual machines, or and it doesn't have to be a virtual machine, it can be an actual machine, actual server. Things that interface with routers/gateways through Bash or Terminal or C Shell. Things that I studied at New Horizons Learning Center, or Capital Region Career and Technical School, consoling into routers and switches and configuring them for the Cisco Certified Network Academy program that I studied in 2001 and 2003 under David Patzarian, alongside Alex Flipsack and Cameron Beavers, in addition to a bunch of other guys. I can't remember their names. So new FE infrastructure is an idea that I had to integrate a way to manage a bunch of routers/gateways, switches, whether they're virtual or actual, and servers, Active Directory domain controllers, and clients, whether they're virtual or real. And I haven't really even hit the tip of the iceberg with all of this stuff, but a lot of this overlaps with Cisco SD-WAN, as well as System Center Configuration Manager, as well as Kubernetes, and a couple others that I can't think of off the top of my head. But what I wanted to do is really ambitious, but the end result was going to be pretty simple, and it was going to provide a way to control all of these various devices through PowerShell. But obviously there'd be plenty of room for interoperability with other languages and consoles or terminals or whatever, and having to like constantly switch back to my phone here so I can stay on topic is going to be a little bit of an issue with my screen timing out. So new FE infrastructure was basically a demonstration of how I could set up a whole bunch of things for Active Directory, like setting up subnets and networks and site links, and integrate it all with the domain controller, Windows domain controller, although it doesn't need to be Windows. It's just a starting point. It'll eventually integrate with like Linux or like Red Hat Enterprise Linux or CentOS, or even Ubuntu or Fedora or Remnux or Arch Linux. I'm not going to go rattling off a whole bunch of Linux distributions, but as soon as I get around to fully developing the Linux side of things, it'll integrate with basically things like Chrome OS or Mac OS and things of that nature. Though that's really far down the road. Anyway, so new FE infrastructure relies on a whole bunch of services like DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol, DNS, Domain Name Server, IIS, Internet Information Services, Windows Deployment Service, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, Windows and Assessment Deployment Kit, and Windows PE, pre-installation environment, and Active Directory domain services. Maybe at some point Active Directory Federation services, sort of like tie in a whole bunch of Active Directory topology or things of that effect. And then there's other functions that are part of the module, like new VM controller, get FEDC promo, get Viper Bomb, invoke SimDB. And there's also get ADDS or AD login, FEAD login. And all these functions, at some point, they might be renamed to something totally different. But for the time being, I've named them as such to follow like conventions so that the module could be able to be loaded and then you'd be able to run any of these functions. I've gotten to be very detail oriented about how I want things to be logged, maintained, and controlled. And I've had to jump into the very abstract and basically figure out how to be an application developer from top to bottom. After I started my company back in October 2018, Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen had passed away, and my grandfather Edouard Rimbaud had passed away at about the same time. And I was getting to be very interested in, the idea of application development or programming and virtualization and all that fun stuff, right? All these functions have similar scopes and stuff, but I'm not going to get into all of that. What I wanted to talk about was, infrastructure. How does infrastructure tie into all of this stuff that I've been doing? Well, how does it also tie in with computer answers and what I did there? How does it tie in with like the work that I did at KeyBank or KeyCorp for tech systems? How does it tie into the things I did at New Horizons Learning Center? How does it tie into the stuff I studied at ITT Technical Institute? All these things do correlate to in one way or another. But what also correlates with is what it all also correlates with is the work that I did prior to even graduating from high school with game development or BFG 20K shopping mall, which required me to understand how to write HTML and CSS. I have a website on planetquake.com featuring my maps and stuff for Quake III Arena. Right, I had a lot of ideas when I was younger, and what I noticed, like as I got older, was the things that I studied at ITT Technical Institute and did on my own. It sort of got brushed off to the side, and for a number of years I couldn't understand how or why, like, my talents just kept getting written off by people. So then that's why I started building this program, FightingEntropy, well, module. So it is a program, but it's also like it's a module, and integrates with operating systems that I've used for a very long time. But with a facelift, Windows 10 isn't brand new, but it does provide a lot of foundation for being pretty innovative with C# and PowerShell and .NET, right? Anyway, I brought up this company, Nfrastructure, and I want to talk about some of the people that I worked with when I was there. Matthew Caldwell and Dennis Schilling were the guys that gave me the interview, and within like 3 minutes of me being interviewed, they said, "You got the job." I was like, wow, that was quick. They're like, yep, mad quick. What do you know about it, dude? Anyway, they were impressed with me for one reason or another. I'm not entirely sure. But, yeah, so I also worked with a guy named Brian Schwendinger, who's pretty cool once I first started, but for whatever reason, he and I had communication issues. And then there was Jeremy Mahoney, which I stayed in touch with for quite a while afterward. And then there was Brett Lochner, Kristen Stengel, the girl from HR. Brett Lochner was like my manager for Adidas Reebok, I think. Or like, I don't know, he worked in the NOC along with this guy named Greg. I think, I can't remember his last name, Wally Young or something. Anyway, yeah, Kristen Stengel was the girl from HR. She's the girl that fired me for Matt. And then there's a guy I worked with, JJ Lavery, who was friends with Jeremy. And we wound up being in a band together with my friend Justin Reed and Nick Martone. And and then I also met John Pickett and Dan Pickett. And I fixed this guy, Michael Halpern's laptop. He was a guy that worked in sales. A laptop that he needed fixed, and I fixed it on the side. I didn't really have a lot of interactions with John or Dan. I'm pretty sure Dan was the owner. I'm pretty sure that the brothers owned it to some extent, jointly, but Dan was the guy in charge, I believe. And unbeknownst to me, he lived right around the corner from me on Cemetery Road, apparently. Unbeknownst to me, many years before I worked at Nfrastructure in 2010, my father, who died in 1995, had an association with Jesse Pickett, who I believe is Dan Pickett's brother, at Hudson Valley Community College. My dad wrote on the back of an appointment card for Dr. Kite after he got in an accident when I was 2 months old, hit by a motorcycle. He had to see this doctor at St. Peter's, Dr. Kite, so that he could get his surgeries and whatever. My dad studied application development, physics, microprocessor programming, and a bunch of other stuff when he was at Hudson Valley Community College. And he got an award for being, I can't remember exactly what it was, but awarded some excellence thing. So apparently my dad did very well at Hudson Valley Community College in all those subjects that I talked about. And so I think that there is some correlation between my father and Mr. Pickett's brother, Jesse Pickett. And, the whole time that I worked at Nfrastructure and many years after that, I had no idea what that association was. I managed to find this document in a box of stuff that was in my attic. They used to be in my father's desk. And, I don't know what that link or correlation is, but, I want to talk about what happened on January 11th, 2019. I recorded an audio recording on my Apple iPhone 8 Plus, and I don't think that I ever delivered it to Nfrastructure or Mr. Pickett or whatever, but I told Matthew Roderick about it. And let me talk about Matthew Roderick. Here's the people that I worked with at Computer Answers in 2015 until mid 2019, July 2019. So I worked for Computer Answers I had gone to Computer Answers when I worked at Nfrastructure back in 2010, and I met Pavel Zachenko and like a manager of his named Mike or whatever at they're right next to Subway in Clifton Park. And I had met Pavel beforehand, but I didn't remember him. And then I ran into him again at the Clifton Park store, which was right next to the Subway. I think I just mentioned that, I'm not sure. And their landlord was Bruce Tansky, the Bruce Tansky Corporation, right in the end of Cemetery Road. Computer Answers used to have a shop right at the end of Cemetery Road and old Route 146, I think. Anyway, the people that I worked with at Computer Answers, Dwayne Coonrad, a guy that I kind of miss sometimes, but other times I remember some of the things that he said about me to other people, and I don't appreciate that. But I don't know, all things considered, I kind of liked working with Dwayne. It just, he was very subdued about some of the things that he thought talking about, like in a negative way, would be bad for him. So he had a tendency to not, he had a tendency to shy away from conversations that needed to be had on a rather regular basis, and it caused a lot of problems between me and him. And, then there was Matthew Roderick, who I just mentioned. He was the manager at the Computer Answers shop when I first started working there in October of 2015, my bad. And he wound up leaving Computer Answers and going to work for Nfrastructure, who was not the only person to do that. Right? And then there was Clifford Miller, who was the guy that was on the business solutions team. And he drove around with a guy named Donovan Lennon to businesses and stuff. And so I won't get into the thick and thin of that, but he wound up working for Nfrastructure in the Department of Transportation or something like that. And he was the server administrator. And then there was Michael Post, who was a guy who also did a lot of stuff with Linux and server management. And Pavel Zachenko, the owner, Pavel Zachenko Jr. There's also David Hyatt, Paul Daniels, and Alex Myers. Paul Daniels wound up working for Team Tech under Michael DiGirolamo. I didn't really like that guy. And Alex Myers wound up working for Nfrastructure on the Office 365 team. And these guys had no idea that I used to work at Nfrastructure long before I worked at Computer Answers. Right, and me having been fired from Nfrastructure, caused a lot of these guys to think that, my experience or my critiques should be written off. In many cases, oh, you're the guy that used to work at some place you got fired from. So, what's that tell you? That was basically the attitude that a lot of people had, and I had a lot of, infighting or arguments with many of the guys that I worked with at Computer Answers. The side point. Back in 2017, I was managing the Bennington, Vermont store, as well as the Clifton Park Computer Answers store. And I was also going on sites because Cliff had left, and Donovan and I were going to the Chamber of Commerce and having meetings with business-minded individuals and stuff. but I'll get to that at some point in some other audio recording or video. And I thought that maybe I should go back to New Horizons and actually finish up getting my certifications when I was managing the on-site division and these other stores. And what wound up happening was I met with the guy who had taken over the New Horizons Learning Center for Jim Thomas. Jim Thomas was the director when I went to the school there, and from what I remember, Jim Thomas was a really cool guy, and he seemed to care a lot about everybody that went to the school, like getting what they deserved, or getting their tests or whatever. Like I distinctly remember having multiple meetings with Jim Thomas, and he made it very clear to me that he was gravely concerned that like everybody that came into the curriculum got what they were working for, or it seemed to be a genuine caring individual, right? And then the guy that replaced him didn't have that sentiment at all. And so like when I worked back in 2017, hang on a second, this thing walked up on me. Come on. All right, so 2017, I went to New Horizons. I wanted to figure out how to do more with wireless and networking. Since I already had plenty of experience, I just needed to get finish my track, get the certifications that I had worked toward and everything. And I was told that I have to shell out a hell of a lot more money, and I have to go to the Department of Education. And if I wanted to finish the certifications that I already paid for, I would have to go down to Charlotte, North Carolina, or South Carolina, or wherever Jim Thomas moved to, right? And I didn't like that idea. I got really salty about it. But I remember very distinctly that the owner, the guy that I met with, he's like, well, if you're going to try to get into the enterprise realm, you're going to get creamed. I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. So I sort of put that on the back burner. And then I went to every store. I reinstalled the networking equipment at each store. Like I had already revamped the network in the Clifton Park store. What a lot of the guys don't understand at the company was that the reason that my numbers were so high whenever I would work compared to other people is because I would upgrade the equipment that I was using in order to do my job and service the customers. So typically a customer would come in and they would need whatever the service was. My idea was to sell them the performance and protection package, which was a solid state hard drive of various sizes along with Windows 10 installed, with all their data transferred and everything, and they would have a 3-year warranty on it. It would work faster, and it would actually help me do my job more quickly. And I started to get very curious about ways to be able to deploy the operating system to the disk before the customer would even come in. That way they could just slap, drag and drop their stuff into the computer and whatever. And for about a year and a half, I became more and more interested in revisiting my HTML days and my doing stuff that I did at ITT Technical Institute, like web design or print design type stuff, 2D graphics editing and whatever. I had also studied 3D modeling, although that wasn't much different from me using GTK Radiant and making levels for Quake III Arena. Really wasn't all that different. Anyway, so now I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start to talk about what drove me to PowerShell, the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So one of the issues that I came into when wanting to deploy an operating system in the least amount of time possible was being able to use the Windows deployment server that Michael Post and Clifford Miller had set up. I had previous experience with some of this stuff at New Horizons, but I hadn't been able to integrate what I knew about virtualization or Hyper-V or Microsoft Virtual PC 2007. I also didn't have a way to implement what I did at Nfrastructure, where I used Norton Ghost to multicast images that had everything already loaded onto new machines and stuff, which is what I did when I worked at Nfrastructure. I know I just mentioned that. It's probably redundant, but yeah, so I started to remember like the things that I did over the years, and tweaking networking equipment and scripting switches and routers and flashing firmware onto devices and being able to network it all with Ethernet cables that I would run, and setting up hard drives with all the information that a client would need, whether it was like a business client or a residential client. I wanted to come up with a solution that handled both, and that's when I started to become very interested in this idea of the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So before getting into that though, there was also this idea of having worked with Oracle VirtualBox at KeyCorp in 2016 when I worked there. We migrated everything that was on the first Niagara financial group, everything over from FNFG to KeyCorp. Nfrastructure was involved in the transfer. They went to the branches, they installed the equipment. Matthew Rohrig was one of the guys that did that, and he and I talked about it as they were doing it. And then eventually I had a very interesting first taste with System Center Configuration Manager when I was at KeyCorp, which did a lot of operating system deployment, but it also went a step beyond that by like managing Windows updates to each terminal within the enterprise and everything. And so I thought, like, okay, well, what if I could merge all of these things, right? And in 2017, I went to each store. I didn't really fully invest myself in the MDT method. It basically setting up static images on the Windows deployment servers, but the servers were pretty old and slow, and the end result was like it was going to take a lot longer to do, because then they would have to install the updates, and then they'd have to install all the drivers and then transfer all the data. So it was not really accelerating it much further than like a USB thumb drive, and then just downloading the stuff needed with the media creation tool. The Windows 10 media creation tool is what we used a lot of the time. It was very useful, but it needed to download stuff and then set up the drive and everything. And if Microsoft came out with an update for Windows 10, then we'd have to use the new thing, and it would download this stuff like every time and take a while to set up the drives and whatever. And so I am sort of getting away from the point I wanted to talk about, but all this stuff is somewhat relevant. And anyway, when let me take a pause here for a second. So, at the tail end of 2017, I'd gone to all the stores, the computer answer stores, Bennington, Vermont, East Greenbush, Schenectady, Albany, Clifton Park, Brooklyn, Greenpoint, and East Village. And I had set every single store up with a PF Sense box, which was already set up, but it needed to be reinstalled with newer firmware and everything, and updated and upgraded, which is a process in and of itself. Being able to remotely connect to all of these devices, was sort of a pain in the ass because they didn't have an Active Directory domain set up, connecting everything from site-to-site topology, which kind of got me interested in building this new FE infrastructure tool to begin with. And then also the servers, being able to manage all the servers and manage all the logins and manage all the file servers that were saving the tools that I stored on the network tech drive. And the network tech drive was basically a file server share that had all the tools that the techs would use to be able to run diagnostics or be able to install like a bunch of programs on a wipe and reload of an operating system, sort of played in with the performance and protection package that I talked about. And then being able to save all the customer's data from an old machine to a new one. And I began to conceptualize this idea of using something like LapLink PC Mover to be able to transfer everything from an old system to a new system, right? And then I dabbled with a bunch of different ideas, and then the end result that I finally wound up coming to terms with was doing it all with virtualization in the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So the idea that I came up with back in 2018 was, 2017, before the end of 2017, before I went around reinstalling all the server equipment and stuff, I had bought myself a Ryzen 1800X processor and an X370 ASRock motherboard, and set up a system to play a bunch of games and do all my stuff at home. And I was impressed with it. It was able to do virtualization and everything. I had waited 10 years for this processor to come out, and this place up in Malta, GlobalFoundries, along with AMD, really smacked the home run with developing this new CPU architecture, which was a huge improvement over the FX series. The FX Bulldozer series was trash, mainly because, they screwed something up when they were taping out I don't want to get into that, but when I had a Phenom 2 processor, and then I went and I installed the FX processor in a new motherboard and everything. I actually had less performance when playing games like Quake Live. The old game that ran worse on the newer system that I spent money to build. I was pretty pissed off about it. I was getting some performance increases in other titles and other games and stuff, but when they were conceptualizing the idea of Zen, I was looking forward to it. I was paying attention to all the news and everything. I still remember when Linus Sebastian from Linus Tech Tips and Luc Lafreniere were talking about it on the LAN show. They're like, AMD's shares are going to be worth $10 each by 2017. I was paying a lot of attention to this Zen processor that they were going to build up in Malta. I also paid a lot of attention to it when I worked for the Times Union back in 2006 to 2009. I would drive around in Clifton Park, Half Moon, Mechanicville, Malta, Stillwater, Malta, Ballston Spa, West Milton, delivering the newspapers. I was driving right around the Luther Forest Tech Park area before it was built, thinking about how cool it was that I was seeing like all the headlines for this place. And I didn't realize just how powerful, how important this place up in Malta would turn out to be, right? So all this is taking place in Hudson Valley, basically. Sidestep all of that. I wound up meeting a client by the name of, I'm not going to say his name, but I met with him because he needed help with his email. And then when I went and met with him, he had a whole bunch of systems in his office that were trading currency, not mining cryptocurrency, but trading currency on the Forex currency trading market with a program called MetaTrader 4 or MetaTrader 5 or whatever. And so like when I met with him, I was like, I could build you one computer that does the work of all these computers here. And he looked at me, he was like, really, you could? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, how would you do that? And I started talking about this Threadripper, right? And this was like at the tail end of July or the very beginning of August. It's right around the solar eclipse of 2017. And, after talking with him, I told him, yeah, they're coming out with this processor. I just got the 1800X, which is the same sort of platform or architecture, and it performs really well. It does a lot of virtualization and stuff. I was thinking a lot about like doing virtualization with Oracle VirtualBox, but then I also remembered how to do it with VMware and Hyper-V, or Microsoft Virtual PC 2007 reimagined as Hyper-V. And so I told him all about this Threadripper platform, and the next day he called me. He was like, I want you to build that thing. And this is when I was working in the Clifton Park Computer Answer Shop in 2017. And so I built him this machine, and when I built the machine and delivered it, he was happy as hell. And what I didn't realize was that I would be spending quite a lot of time tuning his system to do what he wanted it to do. And then as I was doing this, I wanted to like refine the ways that I was doing it, because I experienced a bit of issues at first, because I was a brand new architecture, and I installed Windows 10 on the machine when I should have installed Windows Server, and they used Hyper-V, but I wasn't aware of all that yet or knew how to do it. So in 2018, I spent more and more time thinking about becoming an application developer. I started thinking about ways to improve the customer relationship module that the Computer Answers was using. I was basically teaching people that worked at the company how to use this damn thing, and had a lot of growing pains. Pavel used to have a system that was very HTML heavy and based, and then he upgraded it with the help of Saurabh Garrett, who's I don't know his country of origin, but he's an application developer that came up with this new system design. And anyway, I became very interested in being able to like build something quite like that. And then I sort of had like a hiatus with Computer Answers, because I got in like a relationship with this co-worker's girlfriend. Her name's Renee. And the whole entire summer I was thinking about like how to become an application developer, and then starting my own company. And then Pavel was like, well, maybe you could start your own company and we'll be able to do business alongside each other. And yeah, that was the idea that I like went gung-ho with. And I was still doing like on-site type stuff. I did work with this company, Precision Periodonics. It didn't go all that well. I'm not going to talk about all of that, but they had like a very serious Trojan on their network that I found and I cleaned off of their system. And like I said, I'm not going to talk completely about Precision Periodontics, because I'm going to put that as a side point for now. But after that whole ordeal, I met with this guy with the Threadripper system that I built. And then I started getting into this idea of scripting and stuff. And what I didn't realize then was that scripting and programming aren't that different. So I figured out how to do for loops and stuff in a batch script. And then I set up a batch script, and I started doing a lot of labs with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And that's when I started my company in October 2018. And then I started to invest myself in this idea of scripting stuff, so that I could set up all these virtualized systems on this dude's machine, and do it with the same code, so that it would reinstall the operating system on each virtual machine, and then move it to where you wanted it to be on the desktop, have all the programs installed on each system, and then have it plugged into the independent market that it was supposed to be studying or monitoring. And I got really far into that, but like as I was doing that, I realized that what I was doing could also be applied to like all the other problems that I had mentioned. You know, like the Windows deployment server at each store would often have an image that would go out of date and it needed to be updated and everything. So sidestep all of that. Let me open up a notepad thing here again. I began to look at PowerShell deployment, which was developed by Michael Nyhouse, Johan Arwoodmark, and Michael Nystrom. And what I didn't know then, that I definitely know now, was that the guys who made System Center Configuration Manager are like Michael Nyhouse. He came up with the business desktop deployment tool, which is the precursor for Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which that was a precursor to the System Center Configuration Manager that I used at KeyCorp. Didn't know all these things. But PowerShell deployment was a conceptual thing, a proof of concept that Mr. Nyhouse had worked on. And then I also saw that Damien Van Robees had worked on it, and he had a tutorial on how to do things in XAML and then tie it in with PowerShell. And at some point, everything just clicked right there and then. I was like, I could do everything that I'm trying to do with PowerShell, couldn't I? And no one was standing around and say, yeah, you definitely could. Microsoft spent a long time improving PowerShell to do all these things. Jeffrey Snover may very well have told Red Rover to move over, and now we have PowerShell. So that's supposed to be a cute little joke. I don't know if there's really anybody named Red Rover or nicknamed Red Rover over at One Microsoft Way or whatever. But Jeff Snover and a whole bunch of guys at Microsoft came up with PowerShell, and they worked very diligently on integrating a whole bunch of work into making this easy to use interface. Though PowerShell isn't really all that easy to use. It's got a pretty steep learning curve. But I was able to conceptualize some ideas by seeing Damien Van Robees' PowerShell wizard using, and also seeing the PowerShell deployment. And then I wanted to integrate the both of them, and that's what I started doing between October of 2018 to January of 2019. And then lo and behold, at some point, the computer answer shop is attacked by a ransomware attack. I don't know if it was internal sabotage caused by Pavel Zachenko. I don't know if it was somebody over at Nfrastructure that was watching what I was doing. All I know is that when I worked at Computer Answers, Nfrastructure was not very far from where I was. And they sold us equipment that I bought, a Cisco AeroNet 1142 DN access point that I had also similarly used at an on-site out in Cobleskill, reinstalling a whole entire wireless network for a hotel, and having to flash all the firmware on each and every single one of them, and change it from the LWAPP mode or the CWAPP mode to the LWAPP mode. The CWAPP mode was basically looking for a wireless controller. And then the LWAPP mode was the lightweight mode. So they would operate in standalone rather than to look for a controller to manage all the network equipment. I spent a fair amount of time looking for ways to, virtualize a controller, to make my own controller with the networking equipment, though I wasn't quite ready to do all of that. So anyway, then I spent a fair amount of time coming up with this precursor to FightingEntropy called Hybrid Desired State Controller, which is basically a combination of domain controller and desired state configuration, and it was supposed to implement a whole bunch of ways to manage Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, the the task sequence creation, operating system import, importing images with the deployment image servicing module, and having to figure all that out took a while because I wanted to like make it so that the tool would be able to carve out like an image that would have all the information of the company that would be deploying all of this stuff. Right, got a little carried away with how I could go about doing that, but in that process I was able to figure out how to write PowerShell really, really well. I kept getting better and better at it. I started to come up with other ideas to implement, like how to manage the OpenSense gateways or the pfSense gateways and the switches and the desktops, the servers, all that other stuff. And I want to sort of like make a video of me walking around talking about all this stuff, but this is requiring a lot of concentration for me to do. So I have to sort of come up with this blueprint here and then sort of expand upon it. So what does BFGA 20K Shopping Mall and GTK Radiant have to do with XAML and PowerShell? Well, the HTML and CSS, and also the 3D Studio Max, the AutoCAD and the Maya type stuff, and the Quake III Arena stuff that I used to do, my Microsoft certifications and my CompTIA certifications, but also virtualization. And then being able to, capitalize on all this stuff with the Zen Threadripper and do it all with PowerShell. And so now I've reached the end of the document that I wrote, right? Talked about a lot of stuff. When I worked at Computer Answers, I did a lot of the things that I wish that I was able to do at Nfrastructure. And, Nfrastructure was a rather corporate environment, laid back. You had role or duties. The duties that they had there, my duties were rather limited in scope, but that was mainly because I was basically overqualified for the position that they hired me for. They just didn't know that. And though I continued to try to increase my duties and responsibilities and therefore income while I worked there, I don't think these people realized like how much of a go-getter I really was. And the same thing happened at KeyCorp, same thing happened at Computer Answers. And what I was left with was this notion that maybe I could capitalize on all of this stuff and integrate basically everything that I talked about in this audio recording to build a program called FightingEntropy. Started with it, I'm going to end this whole audio recording with it. Sort of walking around right now, talking this stuff out. And, for what it's worth, I spent quite a lot of time trying to get people's attention. Sometimes I would use, talk about, the jobs that other people did. I noticed a lot of problems with companies leaking data or not knowing that they were leaking data, or, businesses that I would go to an on-site having no fucking clue that someone had a Trojan on their network and was watching everything they were doing. And a lot of people don't realize how dangerous that is until they're a victim of identity theft or cybercrime. And so that was something that FightingEntropy shifted into. But there's only so much that I can do as one person, though everything that I talked about sort of plays into this idea of if someone is sort of victimized by somebody or something, migrate all of their data and then make sure that the data that's being migrated isn't malicious and it isn't going to set up a scheduled task. It's going to run a script and then cause a whole bunch of chaos and then lock a whole bunch of data on a particular hard drive and hold somebody's data ransom for hostage as ransom for ransom. Excuse me. What I'm doing is pretty ambitious. I'm basically trying to do the same thing that Michael Nyhouse did, but with a hell of a lot less help. And And I think I've succeeded in some parts, some portions and everything. I don't think that I've completely succeeded at all the things that I'm trying to do. You know, I talked about Get Viper Bomb, which is basically a program that's going to do similar things to desired state configuration, but also like setting up all the prerequisites for like a service, not unlike System Center Configuration Manager, and be able to set up a whole bunch of features, packages, updates, event logs, and a whole bunch of other stuff, all on an easy to use interface that, you know, makes it pretty dead simple, that I've, you know, designed with XAML. XAML isn't much different than HTML and CSS combined, though I think that it sort of merges what both of them are able to do in a much more eloquent way. And that's why I became pretty interested in writing stuff with XAML. Because if I couldn't visualize what I was working on and show it to other people, then, you know, I could spend X amount of time working on something, but no one would ever know what the hell I was trying to do or what I was attempting to accomplish. Right, and so my work is very far from complete. What I've noticed is that life tends to get in the way. A lot of people tend to, you know, see with their eyes and not with their brain, right? A lot of people don't realize this, but, you know, seeing is believing, but appearances may be deceiving. So if I'm talking about all this stuff that only like seniors at Microsoft would, you know, have a pretty good understanding of what the hell I was set out to do, then, like, you know, having a conversation with regular everyday people, they're not going to give a shit, because, you know, if I'm not making money doing what I'm doing, then it's not going to matter to them, and they're not going to be blown away by the idea. And then also now we have ChatGPT, which is sort of like automatically writing a whole bunch of code and everything, right? But, you know, prior to ChatGPT being a thing, I did conceptualize a lot of these ideas, and I did like build a lot of stuff in XAML to show off like some of the ideas that I had. You know, like everything that I worked on has shown that I have a degree of competence in being able to build this solution. And then, like, I've gotten absorbed in a whole bunch of smaller portions of the grand scheme of things, wanting to make it more efficient, or work automatically, or be able to manage itself, or automatically configure itself. You know, being able to do all this is not easy. And then, you know, doing it all with virtualization, I could set up a whole bunch of computers with PowerShell, and using something like Threadripper to be able to capitalize on how to set up a whole bunch of these virtual machines to the nth degree. You know, set up a whole entire virtual network, set up a virtual gateway, set up virtual servers that spin up a virtual, you know, MDT server that's using PowerShell deployment that could, you know, use a template to deploy a whole bunch of operating systems, whether it's for additional servers or workstations, and then use a scripting engine to be able to, you know, use something like PowerShell to set up every single component of the operating system and leverage, you know, DISM. And, you know, the end result is basically being far more dynamic than using Norton Ghost, or far more dynamic than using WDS alone, right? Dynamically engineered digital security. That was the idea. The end result being providing the performance and protection package to, like, basically every computer that I touch. And the performance and protection package was basically, you know, a warranty. You're not getting just like a service that you're paying for. You are paying for it, but you're not having to pay a residual fee for it. You're getting a guarantee for X amount of time that things will be working in tip-top shape, and they'll be managed and If you had issues or whatever, then you would have support for it. That was the whole idea from the beginning. Had a lot of people that kind of got in the way, didn't realize what the hell I was trying to do, and then I also got like interested in coming up with my own system that did a lot of what the computer answers system did. Didn't really touch a lot of stuff with SQL because SQL, seeing a sheriff driving by, SQL is basically the end result of like all that work. Saving things in a database isn't that difficult, but shaping the database to do what you want it to do requires the proper input and output. Active Directory domain controller promotion tool that I came up with, it does basically the same thing. The XAML front end validates everything before it gets fed into the command to upgrade a domain controller. Same thing would happen with the front end, the XAML front end. It'd be able to get all the information from the database and be able to populate everything in the XAML front end to make changes or edit records or what have you. And then also be able to manage a whole bunch of devices and issues and services and accounts and expenses and inventory and purchases and then invoices. I don't know if I said that. But be able to manage all this stuff so that the money keeps rolling in and it's managed, and all the separate components that make up the system would allow me to continue building what I'm building. Sort of like dabbling with the sphere of Salesforce in that degree. Though, I don't know, what sets everything apart from, being something that I could sell is, having a partnership. Need to have a partnership with somebody that has capital. And I've had various business relationships before where I would be able to focus on that, but I don't think people realize like how much of a dedicated son of a bitch I've been. Be able to manage things on a system level, but also in a presentation level. Making graphical user interfaces sort of show what I wanted to build and then demonstrate it. Was sort of the idea with the video that I made a couple of years ago, new FightingEntropy, but the module needed to be updated quite a bit. It needed to be simpler to use and simpler to recall certain functions in memory and not be compiled that whole entire time. I don't know, I think that escapes a lot of people's mentality is everything runs in PowerShell. It runs in the PowerShell.exe, right? And as long as the code is written the way that it is, and then I provide a whole bunch of hash value checks, the module will be able to deploy itself, and then certain functions aren't going to work on each platform that it gets downloaded or installed to. But I think the idea is setting up a framework for all this stuff to work together. This stuff all exists, but there's nothing that binds it all together without like the code being written. And System Center Configuration Manager is probably the closest thing that does all the things that I set out to do, and it has a whole bunch of bells and whistles to it too. But I can't expect like the guys at Microsoft to like want to give me a job to build something that's going to wind up being like either they're going to see it as competition. Very few of them are going to see it as something supplemental or supplementary or complementary, right? Something that makes their job and lives easier. But at the same time, I could see how some of them would be like, well, you're stepping on our toes, dude. We already have a product or service that does all the stuff that you're talking about, and you're using all the components and everything. Yeah, I'm aware of that. But if I want to impress or dazzle the shit out of somebody with my ideas, got to start somewhere, right? Can't expect to like fill out a job application or career listing for a place like, I don't know, Kitware. It's a place in Clifton Park, Kitware. You know, submitted a job application like, I don't know, in January or something. Was overqualified for the position, but, you know, I didn't get a positive response from them. And, you know, for what it's worth, I think it comes down to like completing my idea. Because if I go to work for some place, I'm going to be pulled off of that idea that I want to build. I'm going to be tasked with something that they want to have done on a day-to-day operations or whatever. And then the creative aspirations that I've had are going to be in the rearview mirror, not unlike what happened with my Quake mapping or my website design skills back in, you know, 2001, right? All that stuff got put on the back burner. I didn't realize like how useful or powerful having that stuff in my portfolio would truly be. But now I'm at a point where, like, you know, I have to like convince somebody somewhere that you know, I got a lot of cool ideas, and you know, I'm kind of stressed out about how society has evolved over the last several years, and having, you know, things in my personal life devolve into chaos because, you know, everybody believes what they see. And when you say, but appearances may be deceiving, a lot of people will laugh that off and be like, yeah, right, appearances aren't deceiving at all, dude. You're just being annoying by saying all that. You know, that is the general treatment that I get from people. Unless, you know, I walk up to somebody and I start having a conversation with them about all the stuff that I've talked about. But I'm not going to wind up talking about all this stuff in a conversation with somebody because who's going to want to listen to me talk about all this stuff? There's only a certain select group of people that are going to be interested in all of these things that I'm talking about, and they're going to be at some place like Nfrastructure, or they will be at some place like Kitware. They will be at some place like Computer Answers if they had set their bar a lot higher, right? Like Pavel Zachenko never really valued like how creative I was and how the reason that I was able to set such high records for sales is because, like, I had all these ideas and ways to make my work take less time and to get money from the clients a lot sooner and to give them a result that they were looking for in less time. And, you know, like, there's a lot of people that rely on relationships that they have with other people. And then when someone like me comes along and I say, well, I can do like the work of like 10 men by myself, they're going to be like, no, I don't think you can do the work of 10 men by yourself. I don't know. All the things that you're saying are like really too ambitious to sound credible. So that's the idea of like building all this programming, is to give myself credibility. But I've also noticed that, like, you know, people in society, they get like really twisted when you start to talk really honest and direct with them, and you're not sugarcoating anything. And you know, like, I have been diplomatic before, but being diplomatic has put me into positions where, like, I have to bite my tongue and I have to like find a way to not offend people when they insult my intelligence. And this happens a lot. People insult my intelligence all the time, but it's been happening a lot less over the last year and a half. It still happens, but it's been happening less. Mainly because I've distanced myself from basically a whole bunch of people, put myself into a situation where I just kind of have to finish what I started. Otherwise, it will have been all for a lost cause. And I realized, like, during this whole time, a lot of people just thought that I went off the deep end and went nuts and everything, but, you know, a lot of what they see or hear is just the end result of me being stressed out about a number of things and being brutally honest. You know, not holding anything back, being very direct with people. And, you know, when I notice that I might have a need to tell someone to fuck off and kick rocks, you know, I'm not going to waste my breath. I'm not going to waste any time conveying that sentiment. You know, and that's going to curb my professional career quite a lot. but I don't consider myself a professional. I consider myself an expert. And I know that like other people are going to have a problem with that. And be like, well, if you're an expert, then you would have like, be like a billionaire by now. Yeah, I'm sure that like some people have had great success by being diplomatic and then, relaying some of these roles that I've mentioned or rattled off to other people. But, when somebody makes it a point to being very involved in every component of something as complex or sophisticated as what I've talked about, or something like System-Centered Configuration Manager, there are situations where being diplomatic doesn't work. You have to be very upfront and direct and tell somebody that they screwed up. And don't tell them that they screwed up, tell them they fucked up, right? That's what leads to identity theft and cybercrime, is people that are too relaxed, like operating on their relationships with other people to review the handiwork and to see where there's glaring holes or security vulnerabilities or attack vectors and things of that nature, and mistakes having been made. I can tell you right here and now, Microsoft is a company that does not take mistakes very lightly. But everybody else in society, they make a lot of mistakes, and they just say, well, we're human, we all make mistakes. The people at Microsoft don't have that mentality. You make a mistake, it could very well cost somebody their livelihoods or, everything they ever worked for. People are going to get victimized whenever they make mistakes. People get victimized basically everywhere in society, but from what I have observed, Microsoft takes a lot of that shit a lot more seriously than even the government does. Not even remotely kidding about that. You say something to Microsoft about something, they're going to pay attention. They might not make it readily apparent to other people. They're going to be very stealthy about what they do to keep tabs on certain individuals. But I've noticed that people at Microsoft have kept an eye on me and my work. Kept an eye on me and my work and everything, right? I've made audio recordings like this before. I've had people surveilling me on my devices and my equipment, adding lines of pixels in my word editors as I would edit documents, highlighting phrases or sentences in my notes editor on my Apple iPhone, having somebody collect the GPS coordinates or breadcrumbs on my various cell phones or smartphones, trying to figure out where I go on a daily basis. If somebody has kept tabs on me to some extent, but I don't like to talk about all that because that's going to freak some people out. You'd be like, well, I thought you were some security expert, you're a security engineer or whatever. Yeah, to some extent I am. I have some trials and tribulations to go through to get my certifications and everything. Everything that I've done with FightingEntropy, if I were to go to take the tests with all the stuff that I've put together, I'm pretty sure that I would pass the test pretty easily without having to review a hell of a lot. Because a lot of my programming automates a lot of the stuff that's in the curriculum. That's the idea. Having to take the stuff that I learned and put it into a program and automate a whole bunch of calculations and be able to figure out what's there on a network map and what isn't, with the least amount of processing power and overhead, right? Not a lot of people that are going to value everything that I said in this audio recording, but you know what? I think it's time to end the recording and staple it all together at some point, and let's see where that takes me. End log. now should be about the time that I can start to add to this video here. I went on quite a walk, and I talked about a number of things in the audio log. I'm gonna have to edit the video and then splice things together, and this whole process takes some time to do, pull off, but so does the rest of the work that I do. And me walking around brainstorming and farting around and coming up with ideas and etc. and so forth. Well, pretty sure that I'm certain that not everyone will be impressed with something that I'm presenting, but other people will be. It's not unlike, and I think I really should just end the video, but I'm going to close this out with a final statement here. Right, I made a video the other day talking about Elon Musk, called Elon Muskrat. Came up with this little picture of a muskrat and then named it Elon Muskrat. I thought it was pretty funny, but maybe not everybody will find it comical. Maybe they'll be like, "That's stupid, dude." And to each their own. The thing is, I talked about like aging infrastructure, right? These telephone poles, they're all aging infrastructure. At some point in the future, they're going to be antiquated if they're not already. And what sort of companies would seek to think that that idea is pretty stupid are the energy companies that are burning fossil fuels and using nuclear reactors that, a lot of people don't realize the type of waste that nuclear reactors create. It creates very dangerous waste that needs to be disposed of in a very certain way, and that waste is going to be radioactive for, I think, billions of years. But maybe I'm wrong about that. The plutonium, the uranium, there's a few others that they use. I can't think of right now. But anyway, so humans are making advancements with ways to generate power, but a lot of it comes down to how could they make the infrastructure better? Well, what a lot of people overlook is the fact that all these power lines that you see and all the fiber optic cables that you see, they rely on a lot of, there's a lot of power put into distributing all of that. And the typical power usage in a residence, it's not that high. You could get away with having solar panels and batteries like a Tesla Powerwall in order to power your home, and then you could also have other things that make things a lot better for heating or insulating. Getting better roofing, getting better siding. Having a smart smart sensor in the house that intelligently controls the thermostat and changes the heating temperature and everything. And you don't need to rely on fossil fuels or burning fossil fuels in order to warm your home or whatever. There's other ways to do it. The problem is that not a lot of people have put a whole lot of thought into developing renewable technologies. There have been plenty of people doing that, but what I'm saying is that all of the renewable energy technologies, they're steamrolled by this idea that, we could just drill oil out of the planet or burn coal and then power things that way. Things are just good enough, Michael Cook. You don't have to talk about making everybody energy independent. Yeah, no. All this stuff is going to be ancient history at some point in the future. All these fiber optic cables, all the telephone poles, all of it's all going to be wireless. Who thought about stuff like this? The guy that invented AC electricity, Nikola Tesla. He thought about harnessing wireless energy from the air, or from the planet, or from the magnetic fields. And some people know how to use those technologies, but Nikola Tesla wasn't able to secure patents or get funding for his ideas and stuff, and he
invented the X-ray, I think. He invented a whole bunch of other things, which I'm not going to talk about, but you know, the idea of transmitting data wirelessly, you know, Starlink is a pretty good idea, because you know, with the Starship, or even just the Falcon 9 or the Falcon Heavy, you're getting rockets that are reusable. So what that means is that it reduces the cost of sending things to space by a factor of 10, right? So there's a lot of things that NASA is developing. Like I think they like to focus on like engineering things that are in space rather than getting things into space. They're better at making things that are you know, conceptualized to be in space rather than to send things into space. And here's one metric that some people like to overlook. Saw this video by Dustin from Smarter Every Day, and the graphic said the SLS was the most powerful rocket in the world. But no, it isn't the most powerful rocket in the world. The most powerful rocket in the world is the Starship, right? And then some guy like responded, he's like, well, the SOS launches stuff into space and the Starship explodes. And I was like, well, the Starship is rather new, right? If you're going to use metrics like that, let's consider the death count of people that NASA has, you know, killed with their technology or their development and stuff, versus SpaceX, how many people they've killed. So NASA is like in the dozens, right? Dozens of people, if not more than that. I'm not certain of the exact number. NASA has gotten dozens of people killed. SpaceX has gotten 0 people killed. So let's use that metric from now on. You know, the SpaceX Starship has nearly 17 million pounds of thrust. It dwarfs the SLS by almost 2, and it dwarfs the Saturn V by I don't remember exactly how much. I think it had 5 million pounds of thrust. But anyway, the SLS can only be used once. The Saturn V could only be used once. The Starship, which is not complete yet, will be able to be used multiple times. And that is the reason why SpaceX is coming up with all these technologies that they can capitalize on sending things into space. So a lot of people don't like satellite internet or satellite connections because there's a delay. But the reason that there's a delay is because there's a lot of connections relying on those satellites. Whereas if you send hundreds and thousands of you know, Starlink satellites into space, and they're all in geosynchronous orbit, or you know, they're falling sideways faster than they're falling down, which means that they'll stay in a perpetual state of falling sideways. They're not gonna fall to the ground unless acted by an outside force, right? And so what that means is that the SpaceX satellites can transmit data to transponders or transceivers on the ground, or I don't know, like satellite dishes or whatever, and then like it'll be low latency satellite internet connection. And it'll be faster than these fiber optic cables. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but they could always improve the satellites and the speeds and whatnot. And then like if people really wanted to continue having like these telephone poles, well, they could have them there, but they'll be less used over time. And then the government won't be able to fund like these public utilities. They'll have to be like private companies, which is sort of what they are. Like there's no like set criteria on these telephone poles being public property or private property. What I can tell you is that a lot of private companies seek to benefit and gain a lot of money from these telephone poles, right? And the taxpayers pay for it, and like a private company like profits off of it. It's not supposed to be like that. Public utilities are supposed to be operated by the public, and people aren't supposed to profit off of stuff like that, but that's what happens. It's what happened in the telecom industry. You know, it's the reason why like Bell Atlantic / Verizon Communications suffered like multiple Sherman antitrust cases, right? I've talked about that numerous times in the past. I'm not going to continue to talk about it, but what I will say is that aging infrastructure is it's dated. It has an expiration date, right? A lot of the roads that people are driving on, there's going to be new technology that replaces roads, that recharges electric vehicles as you're driving on it. I've already seen plenty of videos that showcase this. I've seen plenty of videos of roads that are porous, so that like when you dump water on it, it just seeps right through the pavement, and then it doesn't accumulate snow or ice or whatever. And then there's also roads that are like heated, like in Japan, they heat the roads so that like ice doesn't form on it. These are all really cool ideas that require someone like, who has who has the balls, the audacity to bring them into fruition. And for what it's worth, who knows what the future will hold. And look.